The NBA's most significant award is starting to seem like the least valuable one in sports. How did we get here? Well, the NBA has been in existence for 77 years, and around 4,800 players have appeared in at least one NBA game. It's easy to assume that every player who comes into the NBA wants to win a championship because that's usually the ultimate goal. But that's a team accomplishment, which basically makes the trophy a team award. The MVP award was created to highlight the impact and accomplishments of the individual. It's the gold star that validates the ability of a single player. Since its inception, only 36 players have won the NBA's MVP award. At a quick glance, it's clear to see that these are the best of the best. These are our basketball legends and icons. Oddly enough, the award has become more and more controversial over the years. At this point, it's almost a guarantee that fans, media members, and players will disagree whenever the MVP award is given, and this year was no different. Over the last few years, Nikola Jokic has been universally recognized as the best player in the world. His place in NBA history is already stamped, with him being one of 13 players to win back-to-back MVPs. Being in such elite company would suggest that each MVP he's won would be universally accepted. The thing is, it hasn't. Well, that pattern continued in the 2024 regular season. Joker won his third MVP in 4 seasons, and the controversy was at an all-time high. The disagreement about his selection is pretty ironic because he is the best player in the world, but it's not that simple. But should it be? At its core, the MVP award is super subjective because the various criteria a voter can prioritize. You can look at statistical performance, impact on team success, historical precedence. Right off the bat, we usually hit a snag just trying to nail down a solid definition of what the MVP even is. You have some that subscribe to the idea that the MVP should just be the best player on the best team. There's legitimacy to that logic. If you're the most valuable player in the NBA, is it crazy to expect that your team be one of the elites in the league, if not the best team in the NBA? Well, ask it another way. How can you be the most valuable player in the NBA if your team isn't one of the best? Should wins justify the award and losses negate it? Well, based on history, yes and sorta no. There are tons of instances where the concept of best player on the best team was a driving factor. Take for example, back-to-back MVP Steve Nash. He won his first MVP after the 04-05 season and his second MVP immediately after. Even though he wasn't viewed as the best player in the NBA, he completely turned around the Phoenix Suns franchise. The year before Nash arrived, the Suns were led by all-star point guard Stephon Marbury. The New York legend was a talent in his own right, but the team had little to no success that season. They'd eventually replace their coach with then assistant Mike D'Antoni. They trade Marbury and acquire Nash the next year. Steve Nash, leading the charge of Mike D'Antoni's 8 seconds or less offense, completely shifted the NBA and catapulted the Suns. D'Antoni's offense was revolutionary, and Nash ran it to perfection. The Suns jumped from 13th in the West to having the best record in the entire NBA. Nash led the league in assists, he posted crazy shooting splits, and helped secure the league's best record. That success earned him his first MVP award, but a little controversy because there were other players that were considered better players overall. It's kind of funny because to this day, Shaq still believes that MVP was stolen.
Did Steve Nash win the MVP over you?
Yeah.
Because he was a better player than you.
Because it had a better record, but Steve Nash has never been the most dominant.
I just want that.
We kind of saw the same scenario play out in the 2010-2011 season with Derrick Rose. Majority of people would have said that LeBron James was the best player in the NBA at that time, but Rose completely turned around the Bulls franchise. He put up superstar numbers, and he had his team at the top of the league after they had only been the 8th seed the previous season. Even though there's legitimacy to the idea of best player on the best team, there's some pretty clear holes. First, in order to be a top team in the NBA, more often than not, you're going to need multiple good to elite players on that team. Take, for example, the greatest shooter of all time, Steph Curry. Back in 2015, he won his first MVP in pretty much a landslide. To his credit, he led the league in three-pointers and, more importantly, led the Warriors to the best record in the NBA. But his numbers weren't quite as eye-popping as some of the other candidates. Regardless, Steph was obviously a top player, but you don't go 67-15 just because you're an all-time great individually. If you look at the Warriors roster, they were a complete team with excellent players everywhere. Steph Curry is the greatest shooter ever, no doubt, but you could argue that his teammate Klay Thompson is easily one of the top 5 shooters of all time as well, and was probably top 3 in the league at that time. Plus, in 2015, Klay was an elite wing defender. Then there's Draymond Green, an 8-time NBA All-Defensive selection who finished 2nd in Defensive Player of the Year voting that year. Steph had great team success, but was he actually more impactful than James Harden, who led his team to the third best record in the NBA with, quite frankly, much lesser talent? Situations like this show how tricky it is to decide the MVP based on team success versus individual performance. Things also get hairy when the primary driver for MVP is simply the best player in the NBA. Full disclaimer, there's legitimacy to the best player in the league argument because more often than not, the best player in the NBA is the one with the best individual performance, which ideally provides the greatest impact. That said, this sets a different tone for the MVP because the best player isn't always on the best team. It's a good chance that logic was used this year, awarding Nikola Jokic the MVP over runner-up Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The Nuggets took home the chip in 2023, but they had a few bumps this year. They eventually locked up the second seed in the West, showing Joker's impact. But was that enough to seal his third runaway trophy? Going by the vote tally, SGA didn't stand much of a shot at grabbing the award, despite his team holding the top spot in the West. Specifically, a young team where his second best player, while extremely talented, was basically a rookie. Leading that squad without another all-star caliber player, the huge gap in voting becomes even more puzzling. There's another head scratcher when we go out east. The Boston Celtics were the best team throughout the entirety of the regular season, posting 7 more wins than the Oklahoma City Thunder. Their best player, Jason Tatum, had an amazing season that obviously put his team at the top of the NBA. Thing is, he had absolutely zero shot to win MVP, despite how he balled out and his team won games. Why didn't his situation play out like the ones we discussed earlier with Derrick Rose and Steve Nash? Simple. Nikola Jokic is the best player in the world. Now, he's more than deserving of the award, but the voting inconsistency is what gets fans and people all riled up. Shaq actually told Joker to his face that he felt SGA should have won the award.
You know I love you, the best player in the league. I want to congratulate you, but I want you to hear from me first. I thought that SGA should have been the MVP. That's no disrespect to you, but congratulations.
Yikes. But this isn't new. Michael Jordan won 5 MVPs in his career, and the Bulls usually finished with the first or second best record, except for his first MVP. How'd he win it? How about 35 points, around 6 assists, and 5 boards a game, shooting an insane 53% from the field? The gap between MJ and the rest of the competition was so huge that he forced the voters' hand. At this point, it's clear the NBA needs to make a change. Our proposition is that the NBA should add a quote-unquote best player award in addition to the MVP. This will cover both cases. We no longer need to justify why Steve Nash's MVPs were legitimate. The NBA could have given the quote-unquote best player trophy to Shaq or Dirk or Duncan or whoever was viewed as the actual best player, while Nash would keep the MVP because he was great on a team that had the best record in the NBA. In the 2010-2011 season, LeBron would win the best player in the NBA, while Derrick Rose would keep the MVP award. Adding this would also remove the sting when the non-best players in the world win the MVPs but get bounced early in the playoffs. Let's just say it was rough watching Giannis get bounced in the second round after having won back-to-back MVPs. The Bucks ran through the regular season that year, and Giannis was extremely dominant. But there were those that felt Giannis wasn't truly the NBA's best player overall. Once the playoffs came, we saw the Heat put the clamps on Giannis with the infamous wall. It got so ugly that Giannis had to let it be known. Don't call me MVP until I'm a champion. Props to Giannis for keeping it 100. But let's be honest, it only looked that bad because the MVP award kind of gave Giannis that unofficial best player in the world status, when in actuality his game wasn't quite there yet. Say that LeBron James, who was runner-up in MVP voting that year, took home the brand new best player in the world award. At that point, Giannis's playoff failure wouldn't overshadow his regular season dominance because, hey, he's not the best player in the world. Many people would think he's the MVP because he's the most valuable player on the best team in the league. Our new award would end all the arguments this year too. Nikola Jokic would receive the best player in the world trophy, while Shai or Jason Tatum would get the MVP award. We think it makes sense, and maybe the NBA will figure this out. All that said, we appreciate you guys for watching. If you like our content, like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. Later.